In God we trust. That was President Donald Trump's message to America and the world yesterday at an Easter dinner that he hosted with Franklin Graham and a bunch of other dignitaries and people in Washington, D.C. And it was to mark the Easter week, which the Holy Week, which President Donald Trump declared on Sunday and has been celebrating all week long. Today, of course, is Holy Thursday. Tomorrow, Good Friday. And then we get into the Easter weekend with Easter services on Sunday. And then I believe the Easter egg roll is on Monday because, you know, it's just a fun time. It's just a fun time for the kids. And also whoever gets to dress up as the Easter Bunny. Although less work this year for the Easter Bunny and the Easter egg roll, as they will not have to, they will not be tasked with following Joe Biden around and making sure that he doesn't release state secrets to young kids and their parents. But I digress. President Donald Trump yesterday offering a prayer up to all Americans and reminding them that this is a country that was founded for the love of God and always will be. In God we trust.
Family and friends will not, and as we gather with family and friends, will not forget the true source of our joy and our strength. America has put our trust in God. It will always be in God we trust. We will never change that. You know, there's a movement to change it. It will not happen. We won't let that happen. Can you imagine a movement to change that? Robert, you're not happy about that when you hear that. Look at him. He's getting angrier and angrier. We can get angry too, can't we, huh? No, it's never going to change. And with God's help, we can overcome every challenge, triumph over every evil, and restore the spirit of faith in the United States for generations to come. We have a very simple slogan, make America great again, and that's exactly what we're doing.
And that is the President of the United States celebrating, like we said, a very, very important week, not just for Christians, but for all Americans. And that is the Easter week and the Holy Week, which we will round up again on Sunday. President Donald Trump has a bevy of course, things going on between now and then. In addition to that, he and his administration are trying to fight back against a staff of Democrats who seem to believe that for whatever reason, these illegal immigrants that President Donald Trump is deporting are God-fearing, law-abiding citizens of the United States who should have the same exact rights and abilities that every other law-abiding United States citizen should have. Most notably, of course, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is the MS-13 gang member who was here illegally, who is deported back to El Salvador, his home country, his country of origin, his country of citizenship, and is now being incarcerated for his illegal activities. Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland made a big deal about taking a trip down to El Salvador to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. However, he was not allowed to. Why? Well, because the guy's in a maximum security prison, and they don't just let any senator or congressperson who shows up unannounced meet with convicted criminals in maximum security prisons. They also would not let him meet with President Bukele because, well, President Bukele was out of town. I guess Chris Van Hollen's scheduler didn't think to schedule a meeting with the president when he was actually in the country. But the backlash and the outrage from the left is still not necessarily quizzical because nobody really understands what those people do, but it is really shameful. And in her press briefing yesterday at 4:30, we saw Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt bring out a special guest, and that was Patty Morin, whose daughter, Rachel, was brutally murdered by an illegal immigrant in Maryland, the same state that Chris Van Hollen represents. However, Chris Van Hollen never mentioned anything about Patty Morin or her daughter, Rachel, and he never gave them the kind of respect, admiration, and time that he's given to this illegal immigrant criminal.
From Maryland, who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this.
That is very sad. That is very troubling. And as you can hear there, it's adding insult to injury because, as she pointed out, Chris Van Hollen is her senator, and he didn't even acknowledge her daughter's death, but now he's using taxpayer funds from Maryland, which I didn't know. That was my first question, was who's paying for this little jaunt down to El Salvador? Who's paying for this little field trip he's taking for no reason whatsoever to go and not meet with the criminal alien who he's trying to save and not meet with the president who he's trying to negotiate a deal with? Who's paying for this big waste of time? Apparently, it's the taxpayers in Maryland, the same people who are suffering under the horrible conditions that Chris Van Hollen is allowing to persist in his state. And it wasn't just Patty Morin who was upset about this, but Caroline Leavitt is totally appalled, and she continues to relay her anger to the media and to the press and to anyone who will listen, especially as Chris Van Hollen continues to make a fool of himself.
Senator Van Hollen and the Democrats applauding his trip to El Salvador today are incapable of having any shred of common sense or empathy for their own constituents and our citizens. Nobody knows this more than the woman standing to my right, Patty Morin, whose beautiful daughter Rachel was brutally maimed and murdered at the hands of an illegal alien in August of 2023. Patty no longer has her daughter because of the failed Democrat Party's open border, and these are policies that President Trump is bringing an end to. Patty should not have to be here today, but she is, and we are grateful and we are honored for her willingness and her request to share her powerful story with the world.
It is a lot of bravery, a lot of insanity coming from the left. The press secretary was on the news later and continued to discuss the really atrocious behavior of Democrats, most specifically Chris Van Hollen, who is ignoring the sworn duty of his to protect his constituents and uphold the Constitution, and is instead flying down to a third world country to try to liberate an illegal criminal guilty of crimes here in the United States and elsewhere.
Difficult, Sean, to stand beside Patty Morin, a mother who has experienced every mother's worst nightmare. And it was incredibly powerful to listen to her words because they are the truth, the brutal truth about what happened to her beautiful daughter at the hands of a heinous monster who should have never been allowed into our country in the first place. And Patty was so courageous and brave to share the gruesome details about her daughter's murder. And thank goodness our justice system convicted this illegal alien criminal murderer of the heinous killing of Patty's daughter. And I was so honored to stand beside her today. And it speaks to she also spoke to just the lack of common sense by today's modern day Democrat Party, because you have a senator in Maryland who is supposed to serve his constituents, including Patty Morin and Rachel Morin and their family. And instead, he is spending more time wasting taxpayer dollars flying to a foreign country in an attempt to bring back an illegal criminal alien foreign terrorist gang member than he ever gave the time to Patty Morin and her mourning family over the loss of his constituent. This shows you how deranged the modern day Democrat Party has truly become. And we are incredibly grateful for Patty for her willingness and her request to share her story at the White House briefing room today.
And there's another narrative Democrats continue to persist with, and that is that this guy was somehow some kind of angel and some kind of, amazing member of Maryland society. He was just a dad minding his own business. This is none of that is true, of course, and we know it's not true because it's coming from the Democrat Party. None of that is the case. This guy was a criminal. He was not a good father or parent or husband or citizen. He was a member of a gang, a deadly gang. And most importantly, he was here in the country illegally. And these are all things that Americans should be reminded of every single day. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States of America, she spoke out and explained once again to everybody the kind of person we're dealing with here and why he was deported.
This is an extremely disturbing case, and as a career prosecutor, it is even more disturbing. Every American tonight should be thanking Donald Trump for making America safer by getting this guy out of our country. I'm going to call him a terrorist because he has been designated as a member of a terrorist organization. So this illegal alien terrorist came into our country illegally in March of 2012. We know that because he admitted that when he was stopped in 2019 by the anti-gang squad. They stopped him at a Home Depot with 3 other members. And here's what's very important. He was wearing a sweatshirt with gang insignia on it. The guy he was with, another MS-13 known member, had a tattoo with very similar insignia on it. ICE declared him as a member of MS-13. The police officers, the gang unit, declared him as a member of MS-13, and also they independently went to a reliable, confidential informant who said not only is he a member of MS-13, he gave them the clique, the Westerns, and he was called a Kaye, which is one of the higher-ranking MS-13 members. So they rightfully detained him, rightfully. An immigration judge agreed. An appellate immigration judge agreed. Now here's where it gets even more frightening. In 2021, his girlfriend previously, his wife at the time, who he had married in jail after he'd gotten numerous tickets, didn't show up for court. He marries her in jail. She has a baby with him. And as a career domestic violence prosecutor, too, I know it takes a lot for any woman to come into court and say they're a victim of domestic violence. This woman came into court twice getting a restraining order against him, saying it's horrific. He had beaten her. He had punched her in the eye. He had ripped her clothes off. What causes a young mother to do this? Her child was with her. She talked about her child in the petition for an injunction for safety. Ultimately, she didn't show up for court. That's your typical domestic violence victim. But this victim was even braver because she was married to one of the top MS-13 members who was illegally in our country and a terrorist.
I don't know why you would marry somebody who's in prison. I just feel like that's a big red flag. But again, you know, I'm not here to judge her decisions. I'm here to judge the decisions of the Democrat Party. And that's the person that they are defending tooth and nail. That's the person that they are flying all over the world trying to bring back into this country. Somebody who was an MS-13 gang member, somebody who had been in and out of prison, somebody who had violated court orders, somebody who 2 judges said, yeah, this person should probably be deported, and somebody who allegedly beat their wife. I mean, it's really interesting. That's the kind of person that they look to protect. And the innocent victims, they cast aside. That's the modern day Democrat Party. That wasn't it. There's more. What's his name? Fields. I always forget his first name. He was also on the news and he said, look, this guy has a rap sheet a mile long.
The media has zero credibility. And I'll tell you this, when we talked about Rachel Warren earlier today at MS-13, a USA Today reporter came into my office in the West Wing and said, the evidence that Caroline Leavitt mentioned, is that the only 2 things that you can point to? And I said, are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? That's the only 2 things. He's a woman beater. That's USA Today.
I mean, we have a stack of papers so high from detectives and from judges in Maryland, a blue state, on Garcia, it'll make your eyes bleed.
It's got a USA reporter comes up to Harrison, by the way, is his name, Harrison Fields, and he says, "Hey, this wife beating charge. That's all you guys have? Like, what more do you need to describe? I mean, if anybody who beats his wife, the mother of his child, isn't that enough to make judgment that they're not necessarily the best people, for the job? Listen, there's a lot more going on too, and we will try to cover as much of it as we can. Donald Trump is being inundated, his administration, with lunatic liberals who are fighting back against the weirdest things. In California, Gavin Newsom is suing the Trump administration over tariffs, saying that they're an unfair tax on Californians, which is kind of ironic because Californians are taxed already at 60% of their in-state income. We also have in Maine various different Title IX discrepancies because Maine still continues to allow transgender athletes to compete against women in women's sports. And that is in direct violation, of course, of a of an order that President Donald Trump signed earlier this year. And the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, she was on CNN and she was asked about that. And she said, look, here's the deal. There's only two genders, male and female. And if you have a male competing against females, you're in direct violation of this order.
Madam Secretary, I do want to put up Title IX because it seems like that's the foundation of your argument here. Just as a reminder for anyone, I know my own mother was a massive beneficiary of Title IX. I'm lucky to be young enough that had been settled by the time I went to school. It says no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So can you explain why you think transgender athletes amounts to sex discrimination under this title?
I think there are two sexes. There's male and female. And so transgender doesn't have a play in this. You're born a boy, you're a boy. You're born a girl, you're a girl. And even with puberty blocking hormones, etc., males are still stronger. Their structure is different. They can perform very differently in competition, and we have to respect and understand that, and give women the rights that they have under this Title IX.
I mean, it's very difficult for CNN to grasp the concept of a government official saying, "Oh, there's only two sexes." That maybe you hadn't heard. Oh, yes, there's only two sexes. There's male and female. And if you're a male and you're playing in a female sports, that's discriminatory against the females. It's pretty cut and dry when you admit, or when you finally decide that to admit that there's only two sexes. And it's interesting to see the media reaction when you have high-ranking administration officials, that's the Secretary of Education, a cabinet member, declaring that on live television. Pam Bondi also was asked about that, and she said, look, we're going to fight and do whatever we can to stop Maine and any other outlaw state that it totally denies Donald Trump's executive orders and executive authority and continues to allow this kind of behavior.
A girls' locker room. One is too many. It's ridiculous what she said, and doesn't just affect one young woman. It affects the entire team, the entire sport within that school. These young women are not being able to compete because of a boy. The boy in 2024 came in 43rd in his category in track and field. Yet when he competed in the women's sport, he won. You know, Governor Mills shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done this, should be supporting women in the state of Maine, and we're going to fight for them if they're not.
Okay. They're going to fight for women in every state. That's what President Donald Trump and his team does. They fight for men, they fight for women, they fight for Americans, and they fight against the evils from abroad and evils, unfortunately, from right here at home in whatever way, shape, or form they take. And they take a lot of ways and shapes and forms. Sometimes the form of the governor of your own state or your senator. And that's something that we all need to be vigilant about. And that's something that we all need to be concerning ourselves with, is making sure that our elected officials are actually representing us and not the people who are trying to harm us. Listen, we've got so much more we've got to talk about, and we'll talk about it. We will later today at 1 p.m. I'll bring you Mark Kaye Saves the Republic, our second daily podcast. That's where we bring you all the news from everywhere, in-depth interviews, more political talk. It's fantastic. And you can watch it live on any of our streaming services, or if you prefer, just download the podcast. Go to iTunes, go to Spotify now that it's back up and running. Search Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. Download, listen, and enjoy.